Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Inventory planning and allocation have never been more complex for merchants. Trends have a shorter shelf life, supply chains are often uncertain, markdowns decimate margins, and as many of the brands and retailers with us today know, returns have more hidden costs than consumers actually think. Getting planning wrong is not an option, and spending hours in underpowered, antiquated spreadsheets is no longer the solution. Today, we'll be diving into why brands and retailers need advanced AI models more than ever, and exploring the processes behind adopting emerging technologies. I'm Megan Hall, and I'm a business reporter at Sourcing Journal. I'm joined today by two amazing panelists, and I would love to let them introduce themselves and share how their partnership began. James, maybe you can kick us off.
Sure. I'm James. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Syrup. I have a background in econometrics and statistics, and so I've always loved data and data inference models. I then worked at McKinsey's consumer and retail practice, which is where I spent many hours with merchandising and planning teams. And the big learning here was that there are brilliant people working in planning, but they're stuck with the wrong, outdated tools. And that's where this thesis emerged that, in a world where you have access to more data than ever before, and with the explosion of AI, we now, for the first time, really in human history, have the tools to make sense of that data. And that it was time for the next generation inventory intelligence software powered by AI. And that's the journey I started while at grad school at Harvard 4 years ago.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, James. And we'll pass it over to you now, Molly.
Great. Thanks for having me. My name is Molly Kozar. I work at Abercrombie Fitch, which includes both Abercrombie brands and Hollister brands. Today, when referring to A&F or Abercrombie in this webinar, I'm obviously referring to the total company, though. I've worked with the company for a little over 16 years now, and it has been amazing to watch how retail has been shifting during that time. I have spent my career in allocation, demand forecasting, location planning spaces, and it started with a lot of spreadsheets for data analysis. Spreadsheets will obviously always have a very special place in my heart, but it has been incredibly fun, especially in the last few years, to watch how AI and other data platforms have been incorporated into demand planning analysis and are able to benefit the total teams. I met James and team a little over 2 years ago, I think at this point, and have had an amazing opportunity to learn a lot about AI from him and how he thinks about incorporating AI into forecasting, and it's really been invaluable. So I leave every conversation with James excited about the potential of AI, and I am thrilled to be here to share his passion with you all today.
All right, thanks, Molly, for that intro. Well, if we can just switch to the next slide. While you guys look at these bullets, I just have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to touch on with all of you. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to watch it again or share it with your team on demand, you'll be able to do so in about 48 hours. If you have any questions or any comments, please do type them into the chat bar throughout the session. We'll be sure to take them all during the Q&A session in the last 15 minutes, so it doesn't matter when you submit them, we'll be taking them at the end. If you're looking to submit a question or a comment, please make sure that you're not viewing the webcast in full screen, otherwise you won't be able to see the chat bar. So I frequently cover AI for Sourcing Journal, and in my conversations with retailers, technology providers like James, and supply chain players, I often hear about the mixed emotions that people have around AI. We pulled some real-life headlines from the past year or so, which are on your screen now, to show you the range of emotions that people are experiencing. It can go from confusion to excitement and even fear. I'm sure that some of you in the audience can relate inside of your own organizations. During this webcast, we'll of course touch on the what's and the how's of artificial intelligence, its use cases and the ways in which A&F has successfully implemented it. But we'll also think about the whys, which are perhaps the most important piece. Using AI for planning can help decrease the environmental repercussions of unsold merchandise, and of course, it has the ability to affect companies' bottom lines positively. With that kind of context, I think we are ready to kick things off. So James, maybe we'll start with you. This webinar is called AI Explained, so let's start with something broad. Can you maybe touch on the ways that you think AI is misunderstood right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think for one, generative AI has become synonymous with AI generally, when the reality is that AI has many, many more applications than just creating text or images or videos from a prompt. I think another common misconception is that AI, it's coming for my job. And on the contrary, AI in many cases is here to help make people's jobs easier. Right? That's certainly our commitment. And then if we just go back to the basics, I think AI can seem like magic, right? But the reality is it's just math, and it's complex math for sure, but it's rooted in math that you or I might understand. Right? I read this New Yorker article recently that referred to AI as a glommed together tangle of statistics, which I really liked.
Absolutely. Molly, do you maybe want to weigh in from the trenches of retail? Do you think that retailers don't fully understand what AI is and what it can do for them?
Yeah, AI is a term that is being thrown around a lot these days. And I think that can cause a lot of confusion about what it actually does and the key metrics that we're looking to improve by using AI. I agree with James. One of my team's favorite reminders is math is math. And when approaching AI in our demand forecasting space, it helps to keep us grounded in that way. Most teams are likely using some type of math in demand forecasting today. This is just really complex, interesting, hard math that we're using for AI instead. I found it important to first identify the problem and then to chase if AI can help solve that problem. Finding a great resource like James, who can clearly articulate what AI is and not capable of solving, has been great. And then articulating that with easy to understand words certainly helps.
Absolutely. You just mentioned that James is able to clearly articulate what AI can and can't do. And I think that's the perfect segue into asking James about the different types of AI. So James, in the time that I've spent covering AI, I've definitely heard all about all different types. But as you mentioned, I think there's this idea that generative AI is the only AI that's important right now. I would really love to hear you talk about the differences between Gen AI, predictive AI, which Syrup Tech leverages, and something like predictive analytics, if you would.
For sure. Now there's pressure, Megan, of explaining this, and there's a risk of getting too technical for the purpose of this conversation. So I'll aim to keep this pretty high level. If we're looking at generative AI and predictive AI, the starting point for both is a vast data set that the AI is using as a source. Gen AI, the Gen AI's job is to create something new, right? Using what it knows about how data is interconnected based on its training set. And these training sets, they can be vast, right? E.g., a big part of the internet. And think of ChatGPT or any of the pretty incredible image or video generators out there that are generating new output, right? Predictive AI, as you might guess, has the job of predicting what is going to happen next. Similarly to generative AI, it does so based on how data is interconnected in its training set. And again, these training sets can be vast, right? This could be all of your transaction data and tons of data scraped from the internet. And predictive AI is fantastic at identifying patterns, anticipating behaviors, and forecasting future events. This is what we use for demand forecasts, right? In both cases, in the generative AI and the predictive AI case, the models get better over time because they're learning, right? So for Gen AI, that means more realistic media or better text. For predictive AI, that means more accurate forecasts. And predictive analytics that you asked about, Megan, on the other hand, it's an umbrella term that generally refers to more statistical modeling, which I would think of as more old school approaches that are using regressions to effectively extrapolate the future just from past data, right? It's what you would see more legacy demand forecasting or inventory planning software use, even though it's sometimes branded as AI these days and cobbled together. So that's how I think about at a high level between the different flavors of AI and the difference to analytics.
Definitely. I think you did a really good job of simplifying that and distilling it down for our audience. But given that there's so many nuances, even in what you just explained, I think we can all understand why AI is confusing for so many people right now. And thinking about that, CNBC data shows us recently that around 60% of employees that are using AI worry about its impact on their jobs. I think probably part of that comes from that confusion. So have you seen a resistance to AI adoption, Molly, within your own planning team?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I am a huge proponent of saying that AI is here to enhance your job. Abercrombie always has supported staying curious, and my specific team has been experimenting with AI and demand forecasting for quite some time. That being said, similar to what James was talking about, the data that planners need to consume to effectively run their business has increased greatly over the past few years. And that really starts from product concept all the way through the very end at point of sale. So with that much data coming all at once, it is essential to determine what information is nice to know for solid decision making versus things that you need to know. So a great example is you always hear about weather, and is weather going to impact my product or not? And if weather doesn't impact your product, that's data, but maybe not data that you need. So just because the data is there doesn't always make it useful. My team consistently challenged ourselves with new tools and resources to be able to make those decisions more accurate and faster. And we have found that AI and that toolkit is essential. I think the really exciting part that we've been able to see is that as teams are able to use AI, the time that they get back has allowed them to become experts in a select set of data, such as store forecasting. So being an expert in a select set of data, we can deliver exemplary results under that time. In my experience, tools are never a set and forget, and the human element coming in and interacting with the AI is truly where we have seen huge gains and a lot of improvements. It does require clearly articulating responsibilities and how to use that information or not use that information, but it's been, really fun and exciting to stay curious on this AI journey.
Molly, it sounds like, as you mentioned, A&F has been doing this for quite some time. And so in that time, you've been able to iron out some of the concerns that employees might have had at the beginning and turn it into something really positive. So that is great to hear. James, I think that there are a lot of other organizations that are maybe a little bit more early days. So when you're talking to businesses, how might you quell the fears that some employees or leaders might express around AI today?
Yeah, for sure. I can't speak for every AI offering out there, but we have very consciously designed Syrup to be a decision support system powered by AI. Right? For most brands, maintaining a human in the loop approach, it's the right one to take, right? It allows them to take an art and science approach to their planning. It allows them to train people to become real demand experts, as Molly was saying. And I think the A&F case, right, maintaining the human in the loop, has actually made the outputs better and has made the results better. What AI really does is take the boring, tedious, intensely manual tasks of a planner's to-do list, right? Freeing them to focus on higher value, more creative or strategic actions.
Absolutely. You both touched on this idea that planners are getting their time back and becoming real experts. Molly, I'd love to dive into some of the experience that you've actually had doing this. So we know that you run a planning team for over 750 stores, and that makes your expertise really valuable to us about getting the right product to the right place at the right time in the right amounts. So We know that ANF also came out with strong Q4 earnings, and I would love to hear a little bit about what you're doing to keep inventory lean and how AI plays into that strategy with the expertise of the humans that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is helping our teams be more precise on how we deploy inventory across the globe. Within the last few years, really, Abercrombie has been experiencing change in brand positioning, change in our target customer, our store footprints are changing. The mix of digital versus physical is all changing. And AI is one of the tools that we have been able to leverage to give us that speed and flexibility to be able to keep up with those changes. In terms of results, as you mentioned, getting the right inventory to the right place at the right time, that is like, something I think we all say every day here in the office is my department, which has been fun. But it's incredibly important to us. So the turning of our inventory obviously leads to less red lines and higher margins as a total company. And inventory that allows us to chase and reduce promotions has been a key accelerator in the Abercrombie brands this year.
Molly mentioned just there that AI has helped make inventory decisions more precise. Maybe, James, you can elaborate a little bit more on what some of the specific functionalities that AI offers planning teams are, other than that, if you would.
Absolutely. On the engine side, it's data consolidation, data cleanup. It's also improving forecast specificity and forecast granularity. So the ability to go down to the style, color, size, location level. And you've got the intelligent optimization of inventory decisions, like placement and buys. That leads us to the workflow side. On the workflow side, power initial allocations, rebalancing of inventory across nodes, replenishing of inventory across the network, and then buying, rebuying, and assortment planning. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg, right? It goes deeper, it goes into pricing, full MFP cycles, and actually driving supply flexibility and postponement, shortened lead times, zero waste production. AI can power and empower all of that.
I love what you just said about AI can empower that. I think, as we've talked about pretty extensively up to this point, humans are really very involved in this process, and AI is all about data. I think planning used to be done with a lot more gut feel, but as I just mentioned, AI models really take in that data and process it. Molly, what do you do when the two conflict? How do you reconcile that, and how has your company worked to fuse this historical and real-time data that AI is offering you with human intelligence to make this system smarter and work for you?
Yeah, that is the big question out there, right? How to balance the data and the gut feel, and certainly something that we're continuing to learn more about. So planners still need to have a very strong grasp of what is driving their business and developing that gut and having an omni-channel lens on what is going on. They also need an understanding of what is driving the AI model and the output that they are seeing. So understanding both, again, is really combining that human and data side to get some really interesting results. Training and developing that both are going to be wrong sometimes is totally fine. Hindsighting and continuing to evolve in those processes has been key in success. So we are a test and learn culture here, and we will continue to test and learn, especially in scenarios where the gut feeling and the AI models are maybe not coming together. An example is if the planner has a data set or an insight that isn't in the AI model, like if your company is hosting an event in a store and you know that that is happening, but the AI model doesn't know that's happening, that could be an indication to follow your gut because you know something that the data doesn't necessarily have access to. I think that has led to some really great results. The next step, though, is how do you get that data into the model? So that way the model can start learning a little bit more of what is happening when the next time you have that store event in a different location, or other examples there. So the more we understand how the two can work hand in hand, and that it's not AI versus your gut, it truly is like AI with your gut, has been able to produce amazing results.
You spoke a little bit about the kind of data that's going into this model and training it properly. So I know that this is not a consumer-facing product, but you are integrating consumer buying data and data about your consumer, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I certainly don't expect a consumer to walk into one of our locations and say like, wow, I bet they're using the coolest AI models. They're not going to see that. But the customer is at the center of everything that we do here at A&F, and they are certainly impacted by the results of whether we are using AI models or not. And the end goal is to get the right product down to that size level, to the location that the customer wants to interact with us. And they will feel that and they will know that. So we work to build an experience that matches our customers' needs. And in that sense, it is really impacting that individual customer as well.
I think it's really interesting to hear about how the customer is actually impacted by this, even though it seems like a bit of a back-end process. So you just touched on using consumer data and consumer insights to help power this. But maybe, James, we can turn over to you to hear a little bit more about the other kinds of data that Syrup Tech leverages. So maybe weather patterns, consumer shifts, or otherwise.
Absolutely. I think one thing that's important to mention just up front is that, historical data, the classical historical data, that it's still incredibly important, right? That forms the foundation for the engine, and just third-party data will never be as good as combining that with your own historical foundation. From there on, though, AI models are incredibly flexible to incorporate essentially any other data point, right? Even those that might not be that helpful, and this is our job then, to understand our customers' business, and particularly the apparel, fashion, footwear business so well that we can recommend the right data to improve the performance of the forecast or of the optimization algorithm, right? And what we are doing, we are constantly testing on the back end to see what new data sets might help, and even coordinating very closely with our customers to get ideas from them. And actually, a lot of the best ideas that we have gotten have been from close collaboration, close partnership with incredible partners. That said, data sets that we have considered and that we do consider analysis include external sources like scraped social media data, local events, and yes, of course, weather as a really important one, right? On top of that, we can also consider untapped internal data sets like marketing activities or ad spend or sales promotions. And one interesting one that we used recently is customer review data to inform our returns forecasting. Right? The possibilities here they're really endless to complement historical data with real-time data and to infuse demand forecasting with a 360 view of our customer's customer, and also about the industry and the world at large.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, the possibilities really are endless when you have such a trove of data. But I think that also means that there are a lot of capabilities that this kind of technology has, which maybe seems a little bit overwhelming for someone just getting started with this. James, maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into what you think the best use case is for a planning team that is maybe just getting started with AI. Is it the buying? Is it the returns that you mentioned? Is it the allocation? And when can a company really start to see results and see the impact of this tech?
Yeah. The answer is a bit cheeky, but the best use case for planning teams is the one that's going to deliver the most impact for them and deliver the most impact quickly, right? For some of our customers that are undergoing, rapid store growth, that means allocations was the right place to start, right? Leveraging forecasts with minimal historical data to ensure that each new store opening had the right inventory to make a proper splash with customers, right? For other brands that offer a unique or limited style run that have real scarcity as part of their strategy, rebalancing has been the right entry point, right? And by that I mean identifying geographic hotspots and rebalancing inventory to those locations to really maximize the full price sell-through, right? For brands that don't have stores, rebuying or chasing of products that are bought on a continuous basis, potentially with slightly shorter lead times, that's a really great starting point, right? And I could go on and on here, but the point is that it has to start with the brand's strategy, pain points, and needs, which Molly articulated a couple of questions ago as very, very, very accurate, right? And then when we look at the impact, it can really happen really quickly, right? The model training and tuning and over implementation time is somewhere around 4 to 8 weeks. Then recommendations start coming, and that allows planners to start making more informed inventory decisions right away, right? For our in-season use cases, you can see the difference of baseline versus uplift in a matter of weeks, right? We often recommend starting with those in-season use cases, even though they might seem, slightly less sexy, like in-season replenishment, but they're beautiful, right? Because they show measurable and attributable impact within weeks versus, e.g., pre-season planning or buying, which have a huge impact potential, but they can take months to be able to measure the real results. So I think the right starting point, it really depends on your exact setup. I'd always recommend starting with something that's high impact and something that you can get up and running quickly, where you can test potentially on a subset of a geographic subset or an assortment subset to really start seeing those results, and then you can expand from there on.
Molly, James just spoke about the vast number of possibilities depending on an organization's needs, but maybe you can help us come back down to earth a little bit and give us an example of the reality. So would you want to weigh in on something throughout A&F's journey with AI and with Syrup Tech and give an example of something that AI helped to predict or maybe help to allocate in a way that you or your team wouldn't have done if you didn't have that data?
Sure. I love that I'm like the one that's like bringing us all back to the ground again. So my team is obviously focused on continuing to improve the placement of inventory and new ways to use that AI. We have certainly seen examples of additional data sets, such as what James talked about, weather, social media engagement, internal data, but it's really combining that with the historic information that James mentioned for the most accurate results when we're looking at placing inventory. Size is another really interesting example and place that AI has helped and will continue to be a key driver for us. Whether that is adjustments due to external factors or external sources, like the way that the customer wants to style or the fit of something, that can change pretty quickly, and we are able to leverage AI to get that quick change as well. AI has been able to see those trends down to the location size level to make those adjustments. And that detail might seem small, but when you add all those small pieces together, it really does make a large customer impact. We also have opened 60 new experiences last year, and we expect to continue to be a net store opener again in 2024. AI is a way that we can further understand those new experiences, and it's critical for those locations to be able to get that information quickly, so that way we're able to adapt and make sure our customer is getting exactly what they need.
You just spoke in multiple different ways there about how important speed to decision is for getting the right size, getting the right inventory, styling it right when your consumer changes their mind on a dime, as they are prone to do. So we know that speed to decision is such a huge factor in fashion at large, and especially when we're thinking about those things like trends. So maybe, James, how can AI help with faster inventory decisions?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the really big unlocks that AI brings, right? That we don't just rely on historical data, but that we have this nearly instant synthesis and analysis of incredibly large data sets, right? That give us a much more 360 understanding and real-time understanding of consumer demand, and as Molly mentioned, exactly down to that size level, right? And that's where AI really helps drive real-time decision-making and preemptive decision-making as we see certain trends pick up. There's also the potential to incorporate AI with manufacturing partners as well, right? Moving upstream can help optimize sourcing, make postponement decisions, drive supply flexibility, and eventually drastically shorten lead times by combining the demand sensing with production decisions. Constant learning helps planners feel confident that the model is changing in parallel with the trend, right? The consumer demand patterns, which are more volatile and are moving, as you mentioned, Megan, faster than ever before, that those are indeed being picked up by the AI. And then this is maybe less about AI and more about the solution, but great technology elevates important changes for the planner right in their typical workflow portal, right? That there's no digging for that needle in the haystack, or that there's no digging for that insight down in granular data, but that's elevated and that, you know, that needle is presented to planning teams.
Absolutely. I just want to pause here to acknowledge that we're about halfway through our time together today. So if anybody has questions for James and Molly, I know it can't just be me, please make sure you're putting them in the chat. We'll be collecting them and answering them within about 15 to 20 minutes here. So looking forward to seeing what you guys all ask. But you know, James, one of the things that you just talked about a little bit there, I mean, maybe inadvertently, is sort of the planners in the driving seat. You talk about the planner gaining confidence, the planner seeing the results. So I think it would be cool to dive in a little bit deeper into the people behind the process. So Molly, when Abercrombie was making this decision to work with Syrup Tech and to integrate AI in general, who are the stakeholders involved? Is it the tech department? Is it the planning department? Is it a hybrid? Are there others involved?
Yeah, that is a great question. And as I mentioned before, Abercrombie has been experimenting with AI, and our teams will continue to stay curious on this new tool and ways of working and new data sets and how we can deliver the best results. I would say the curiosity across our entire campus is only growing about AI. And, you know, we have some great leaders in the planning side and the digital and tech side that continue to articulate the wins that we're seeing and helping us stay curious there. We also have been very public about our Always Forward plan, and that is supported by 3 pillars, which are brand growth, operating with financial discipline, and then the last one is enterprise-wide digital revolution. And with that being one of our focuses and a test and learn culture here at A&F, we're able to team up across several functions, planning, tech, all across the board, and challenge each other on new and exciting ways of working, and especially in that digital space. I do want to call out, it's not just planning and tech though. Inventory placement impacts so many key partners across the entire organization. So clearly communicating changes and what that future vision is, so that way the total team is excited and accepting and ready to go with AI has been critical here. Also, involving all the different stakeholders across the teams allows us to have different perspectives and different points of view. So there could be a blind spot that the planning or tech team has, but since we incorporated our stores organization, they're able to give us feedback that we're able to incorporate into our next decision making. So it truly is the entire organization teaming up together and being excited and staying curious on this.
I think that total team approach really is something that helps with adoption inside of an organization. But it also definitely ensures that you're not just using tech for tech's sake, because the people that are actually leveraging the technology are the ones who are seeing valuable results. When these different teams were considering the technology, how did you know that AI was the right tool and the right fit to help solve some of the things that you were facing at A&F?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think James and I keep kind of covering it, but identifying what you're trying to solve first has really been the key to determining if AI is what you need to help in that process. So something to keep in mind is just because technology is always changing and advancing doesn't necessarily mean it's going to perfectly fit into your business objectives, and that's fine. So determining what will or won't work and testing, learning, reevaluating, implementing, and going from there has been really helpful for us. For us, we're always asking, how can I make this overall experience better for both our customers and our associates? And that helps us drive forward. The only other point I would add is ensuring that your team has the resources and the support for the change is also really important. Clearly defining what part of the process and what level of the organization the information is going to benefit helps for a smooth transition. And then obviously change takes time. So, you might initially slow down a little bit as humans start using the machines, but efficiencies certainly will come. Just maybe don't expect it on like day one.
Definitely. James, it sounds like A&F had a really strong sense of curiosity when they were starting to align with Syrup Tech. And Molly just gave us some good examples of the types of things that they considered, but it would be great to zoom out a little bit to maybe get your take on what companies should be asking themselves when they evaluate AI for merchandise planning.
Yeah, 100%. And I completely agree. I think Abercrombie it's a special organization where you have a sense of, openness to innovation and openness to the future and a real drive to constantly improve that you can see throughout their planning organization, their merchant organization, their data science, and their tech organization. If I were to, the four questions rather that I would ask is, number one, does the problem that I'm trying to solve map to tasks that AI does well? Right? And some examples, particularly relevant for planning teams, include advanced forecasting, intelligent optimization, pattern recognition, data clustering. The second question I'd ask is, does the outcome I'm looking for, does that map to AI's value? Right? AI's value really has four core pillars, which is informed decision-making, diversity of inputs, granularity of outputs, and speed to insight. So it's really about deciding if this value is what your brand, your company, what they would benefit from. I think the third question I'd ask is, am I set up internally to make the most of AI? Right? As Molly was just mentioning, right? The three most important things here are funding, of course, access to data. Right? Ideally, it's structured. Ideally, it's shareable, but that there's some sort of data access. And then the third, which is this willingness to embrace change, right? And the willingness to try something new. Going back to the fear of AI we talked about before, there's also a fear of change and change in general that can get in the way. AI is, of course, incredibly exciting. So I find it's typically not a huge issue, but I think that mindset is really, really important. And then the fourth question that I ask is really, can I trust the provider or the solution to deliver quality results, right? And for planning teams in particular, we recommend evaluating three criteria with your tech partners, which is, do they have a clear data philosophy? Do they have an ability to describe why they're using certain model types? And then the third is, do they have a knowledge of the fashion space, right? The apparel, fashion, footwear, luxury space. And are they models that are developed specifically for fashion? Those are the four questions that I'd ask if I were part of a planning team.
Absolutely. James, thank you so much for that. And I want to switch over to Q&A just after this last question to Molly. So Molly, when you think about what James just advised to early days companies looking to partner with AI solutions partners, Is there anything else that you might add or advise other companies to consider when they're looking to implement this tech into their organization?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. One, building a high principle team that is motivated, cultivating curiosity amongst your team and peers is certainly necessary when starting anything new. James also hit on this. Change management cannot be overlooked, as it is just as critical to plan out and step through that as any of the other requirements that you are setting up to get AI into your processes. And my last and most favorite one, I would say, is that utilizing humans in lockstep with AI is truly where the magic happens. I cannot stress enough that hand in hand, the human, the data working together is where we have been able to see the best results. And the more frequently we're able to highlight that, the more excited our teams get. So yeah, those are my big learnings from my journey so far.
Well, thank you guys so much. I know we could continue this conversation for probably another hour, but like I said, I really want to ask some audience questions here. And we have quite a few, which is really exciting. So maybe either for Molly or James here, how do you know that AI is bringing in actual value? And what is the impact to your KPIs from AI in the demand or inventory areas?
Do you want to take that one, Molly? Do you want me to?
Go ahead, you got it.
Okay, I think the critical one here is when you're starting to define baseline metrics and define what success looks like. And then it's really important to keep constantly measuring against that, right? What we often do with the customers that we work with is that when we select the initial use case or the initial module together with them, that we split the world in some shape or form. So that could mean that we don't roll out across, all regions, all brands, the entire assortment all at once, but that we start in one region, for example. And then we can use that region as the test group and have the other regions as a control group. We can do the same thing with the assortment, right? Let's say you run all T-shirts through Syrup or all men's tops through Syrup. And then we have all the other departments as a control set. And that allows for this really, really nice A/B testing nearly that then can show you what's baseline and how close are we to hitting what success looks like. And then then once we're rolled out across all of it, then there continues to be this constant evaluation, right? And how are we performing versus targets? If we're below targets, why are we below targets? If we're above targets, why are we above targets? And that constant monitoring is something that's super, super nice about inventory and demand software in particular. It's not HR software where it's like, maybe at some point in the future we will make you a little bit more efficient. But we can actually measure and attribute the impact to this change in what software the team is using.
Absolutely. Another question we have is around something that Molly mentioned earlier, which is this idea that Abercrombie is going to continue to open new stores. So the person asks, how would predictive AI help improve forecast modeling for new store locations or new styles that have no historical data to base the modeling on?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and it's one that's particularly relevant for our industry, right? For apparel, fashion, footwear, luxury. The way that we approach either new store openings or new styles, we start with new styles and we go to new stores, is by using as many comps as we can. And those comps, for a new, let's say we're forecasting for a new navy blue button-down shirt that the world has never seen before. We're not just taking one comp item or a similar item in the past, but we're actually building effectively a weighted basket of styles that look as close as possible to this new one. And we do that using attributes of your structured data, as well as then photo material and image material. right? To say this combination of attributes, these blue colored items, this price bucket items, this department, this similar product, that's how we come up with an initial view of a new item. And then what's really cool is the moment that we actually start getting demand signals, which are transactions, but they're also all the other demand signals that we talked about, like e-com click-through rates or engagement rates, or items put into baskets. The AI can then identify, is it this product or is it more like that product, right? And really really learn and adapt quickly. New stores work similarly, right? Where we take the social demographic and socioeconomic environment of that location, the size of that location, to model it to what's the closest, the most close or the closest similar locations. In both cases, we also allow and encourage actually for planner input, right? Of like, you're opening a new store in Austin, Dallas or Houston might not be the best comp. San Francisco might be a better comp, right? And allowing for that kind of input both in stores and in new products, it's really important.
James, lots of people are asking here about the wholesale side of the business. So they want to know, does Syrup Tech have benefits for the wholesale side of the business, specifically wholesalers that work with seasonal merchandise and with a broad scope of customers?
The wholesale is very, very interesting for AI models as well. It's particularly interesting if we can get sell-out data from your wholesale partners, right? We can also work purely with sell-in data, but it's less interesting, right? Then we're really constraining the power of the AI. The reason for that is, it's really powerful to know if a certain product stocks out, what other products are starting to sell, how is inventory compositions, how do they look like? And that gives us so many powerful points that our recommendation is, if we can get wholesale sell-out data from one of your data providers, it makes for a really interesting use case. If it's just sell-in data, you can still do it. It's just less powerful and less interesting.
So somebody had asked about the difference in how your merchandising team uses the tool versus how your planning team uses the tool. They said that in their own experience, they know that they have two different functions sometimes, but sometimes the use cases do overlap. So they wanted to hear your experience on that. Yeah.
It really depends on the organization, right? And it depends on, I think, the responsibilities that we have or that you have within the organization. In fact, we sometimes see both merchandising and planning teams use Syrup. We've also seen it just being used in planning or just being used in allocation, in fact, right? So it really depends on the setup. And at Abercrombie in particular, it's mostly the Molly's team actually using Syrup, which is Omni Planning and Omni Location Planning. But it really depends on the organizational mix, and on the one of the things with Syrup in particular, and it's also the case with other tools, that we can be flexible enough that we're not a rigid system that tells you this is how you have to use the platform, right? Or this is how we fit exactly into your organizational flow or your tech flow. But there is more dynamism there to really adapt to both your org structure as well as your workflow as well as your tech setup, right? And I think that dynamism or that modularity is really, really important.
Thanks, James. We have another sort of compare and contrast style question here. So e-com versus physical, is there a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot here. There are, of course, differences, right? The allocation component, for example, it's particularly relevant if you have multiple nodes, and those nodes can be stores. They can also be warehouses. And across a few of our customers, actually, what we're doing is warehouse allocation or DC or FC applications. In e-commerce, right? Like the buying and the rebuying is a really, really powerful use case that we've seen with customers. Particularly, we found is that e-com organizations often buy on a more frequent schedule as opposed to our more traditional 2 seasonal buys. The more frequent usage makes it interesting because it allows you to learn it more. Right? Then I think I mentioned this at some point, that our recommendation is always to start with a use case that's in season and that allows you to test and iterate. quickly. What basically all of our customers have these days is the mix between the two channels, right? And what Syrup's really done is build an omni-channel system from the ground up, right? So all of our models are built for the omni-channel world. So they factor things in like buy online, pick up in store, buy online, return in store, buy online, ship from store, which has made the potential combinatorics explode, really, right? And that's where AI really shines, right? The more data, the more complexity there is, the more the potential upside. So that's where we've seen huge performance gains, and that's where a company like ours just really build kind of cloud native AI first for this omni-channel world, where I think we can also differentiate versus your more legacy planning or allocation tools.
I completely agree.
Sorry.
Looking at, from a planning perspective, the total Omni sales and what is happening has been critical, and being able to react quickly to that as the customer changes is something that we consistently talk about as we want to make sure that we're meeting our customer however they want to shop with us.
We have another question coming in for you, which is Abercrombie & Fitch using Syrup Tech for any other areas of its business like budgeting or marketing?
Yeah, I think in total, our company continues to stay curious on any way that AI is able to help us in the future. And what that looks like is certainly a curiosity that we have, and where to integrate any AI into our processes is something that we continue to talk about. It really goes back to how are we from top to bottom making everything as efficient as possible as an organization to help us drive speed and help us drive change.
Perfect. Speaking of speed and change, James, we have a question about some supply chain disruptions. So how quickly can AI adjust to a changing landscape, like longer delivery lead times due to a war breaking out or fuel shortage?
It's an excellent question. We started this company during COVID. So, disruption was sort of the name of the game. And so that's really baked into the foundation of how we think about the world and how we think about software for this new world, right? So on lead times in particular, it's a great example. And over the last few years, we've seen countless examples, right, of lead times fluctuating up and down. And this is something that we're constantly measuring, right? And that's both actually in production lead times and also then, replenishment lead times, node to node lead times, which, as you know, during the holiday period, that can take longer, or during the Black Friday period, that can take longer. So the AI is quick to pick up on it, as with all of these trends, right? The when we start seeing that lead times are no longer 70 days, but they're now trending towards 90 days or 120 days, that's immediately factored into the optimization. You also always have the ability to adjust those inputs yourself, right? So if you're foreseeing that something is going to be happening, that there is going to be a longer lead time, that's a knob that you can turn to that then drives for a longer buffer or extends the horizon for which we need to cover inventory.
We have some questions about the idea of historical data here. So somebody mentioned that sometimes historical data can be inappropriate for the program or items that are being planned. They'd like if you would please discuss how you address the classification of that data to allow accuracy to be at the forefront of this predictive model.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, right? And I think we all know that the historical data that we're dealing with, that it's often not the most accurate, and that's just the reality, right? And I think a mistake that a lot of AI companies make is that you need pristine data. The reality it's just not the case in our industry. So what we do as part of our onboarding process is a full data understanding and a full data cleaning, right? And we involve both the tech and the business teams at our customers during that process to really make sure that we understand when there are discrepancies or when there are problems, that we can effectively alert the engine and the model of those, right? When during COVID, there was obviously a big disruption that happened, and that's something that we bake in practically into every single model tuning that we do. But it's true that for every single customer, there's always some data cleaning or some data reclassification that we need to do. We have a whole team that's focused on data ingestion, data pre-processing, data post-processing. So it's something that we take really seriously, and that we take really seriously during onboarding as well. You'd be amazed by how much learning you can get even from incomplete data, or from data that might seem incorrect or incomplete. With the proper cleaning process, it's still really, really amazing. And often what I speak to the brands which we work about, a lot of it is about the relative improvement, right? Yes, if your data were better, if we could get more, it would be even better, but you don't have to wait until that moment in time, right? It's always about that relative change that we can drive together.
Thanks, James. Unfortunately, we are running out of time here. For those in the audience who maybe sent in some questions that we didn't quite answer, we'll make sure that you can contact either Molly or James. Molly and James, maybe you can each give your last thoughts here and the best way to contact you if people have further questions.
Yeah, I'll go. Thank you so much, Megan, for hosting this, and thank you so much, Molly, for your overall partnership and for this awesome discussion. I think what's really important for me is that the AI is a journey, right? And we're at the very beginning of this journey, and so you as a brand or retailer, I think, make sure that whoever you decide to partner with, that it's someone who will be constantly innovating. I think for us as software vendors, it's really important that the architecture that we decide on, that it's flexible, that we can grow. And if you want to contact me, my email is just james@syrup.tech, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm James Theuerkauf, and yeah, very, very happy to connect.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. I hope you all got as much out of this conversation with James as I always do anytime I get a chance to chat with him as well. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name is Molly Kozar, and my email is molly_Kozar@anfcorp.com. So would love to continue to talk about all things AI with you.
Well, thank you to both James and Molly. This has been such a great conversation. Like I said earlier, I wish we had another hour to continue it. And thank you so much to our audience who had so many great questions and was really interested in interacting with our wonderful speakers. This has been great, and thank you all again. Hope you have a great rest of your day.